Welcome to Economic Liberty for Main Street. Last year, the last two shows we did were about how the banksters actually sort of have been, not just the banksters, but also our whole government has been doing this institutionalized deception to let us know that, well, they don't think that we really have enough money to take care of public needs. And it's because the debt is just too big. Well, in fact, all this time we've been feeding all this money into one particular sector of the political and financial control, the sacred cow of Wall Street. That sector is the big private banks, financial speculators, and their colleagues at the Federal Reserve. The total bailout for Wall Street was $16 trillion. That's greater than the accumulated debt for U.S. history in its 235-year history. So, we also showed that there is a solution for this problem, and it's public banking. And we made it very interesting, and if you want to check it out on the internet, there's this fabulous tape we showed. It's called Taking Control of Your Money. So you can look, just Google that, it's on YouTube. But we showed how public banking can bring prosperity to the community and help people take care of their own money and keep that money circulating within the state instead of having it all being siphoned off to Wall Street. So today, we're going to talk to you more about public banking, but we're going to really be focusing on how to stop the foreclosure crisis. And there's a really nice component where we can add public banking in there too and get the benefits of both. So, as we all know, foreclosures are really devastating our economy, and so is unemployment. And the foreclosure really has a really bad problem because it doesn't only hurt the person who's lost their home, but it hurts the whole community. Because the property values go down, and then when the property values go down, then the revenue shrinks, and that's why we're having all these governments all over the United States. They're just going under. They don't have enough money. It's based on things like property values and businesses going out. So there's a tendency for people to feel very ashamed when they go through a foreclosure, but they really shouldn't, because this has all been orchestrated by the banksters, because they have almost completely stopped giving credit to small businesses. And small businesses are like the real engine of our economy. That's where most of the employment in our economy comes from, is small businesses. It's so what has happened is the bankers have sort of orchestrated this financial collapse. And as you might remember from last time, 95% of the money that's in circulation gets into circulation through bank loans. So when the banks are cutting way back on loans, whoops, we start running out of money. In fact, last time I made a mistake. I said that in the last 2 to 4 years, $13 trillion dollars had been removed from circulation, but actually it's only a meager $3 trillion. Yes, $3 trillion out of the circulation of money. So another thing about this whole problem with foreclosures is that most of them are fraudulent. And we have a little video clip that shows Phil Ting exposing, he's the assessor and recorder of San Francisco County, he's exposing this industry-wide collapse of the whole mortgage foreclosure system.
And I think what this report shows is that the system is completely broken. The system's broken for us as county recorders. The system's broken for the mortgage industry. The system is broken for consumers. Because clearly we have plenty of laws on the books, but they clearly are not being followed. We reviewed, or Equitas reviewed, and I'm here joined by Mark Rappaport and Lou Pesante from Equitas. And you can see, based on this chart, we reviewed about 382 records, and 84% of those records showed at least one clear violation of law. And we say clear violation, we'll kind of walk you through what that means. Another additional percentage, taking it to 99%, including things that aren't violations but are called suspicious activities. The suspicious activities are things like backdating documents. So it may not be a violation of the law, but it's very odd when you submit documents that are backdated 2 years prior. And they're submitted on behalf of organizations that no longer exist. So they're submitted on behalf of an organization that's already bankrupt and has already closed up shop, but 2 years later, someone's submitting it on their behalf. So almost every single document that we reviewed of the 2,405 foreclosures between January 2009 and November of 2012 showed that. So again, it's a sample of 382 documents that we reviewed between January 2009 and October 2011, and that was of that total was 2,405 foreclosure sales. The main challenge I think that we face is we want to ensure as recorders that we have a clear and transparent title process. And I think that we owe that not just to the taxpayers and all the property owners in San Francisco, but we really owe that to the entire state because state law governs everything that we do. I think it's so important in a state that has a non-judicial foreclosure process that the laws completely followed. Because the reason other states have been able to pick up on these items much faster is because people have to go in front of judges. And the judges clearly understand what the laws are, and they've shown a much less tolerance for people not following the law than here in California. So let me just give you a few examples. So for an issue of assignments, so we have an issue of assignments, and it says that about 75% of the assignments that we looked at showed issues. Now, for one example, we have this category called self-assignments of the deed of trust. 27% of the deeds of trust were self-assigned. So what that means is it's as if the lender of record is not assigning it to a new lender. It's the new lender assigning that document to him or herself. So it'd be like me taking your home, but me just assigning it to myself without your authority. So it seems very odd that 27% of the time that occurred. So obviously that is what we would call highly problematic, and actually it is a violation of the law. 85% of the time there was a substitution of trustee, which is the trustee who filed the notice of default was not the same trustee named on the deed of trust. So that means that the actual trustee who's in charge of almost being an independent third party to foreclose on somebody wasn't actually the trustee of record. So it's this other party who had on record absolutely no connection to the process somehow taking this property away. And we have documents that if you're buying a foreclosed sale, and we're happy to show this with you, basically we have institutions that are basically saying, hey, you're buying this, but if for whatever reason we don't own this property, well, all you get back is your deposit. We don't really, we're not saying that we own this property either, but we're just selling it to you. So I think that is highly problematic. That's 85% of the time, and that was on page 9 of the report. To give you an idea of suspicious activity, what we call is the false claims of beneficiary status. What we do is we have that the entity claiming to be the beneficiary of the deed of trust, the trustee of deed of sale, is not actually the current beneficiary on file when the property is sold at the auction. So again, what it's saying is that you actually have a party that is selling a home at an auction that, according to our land records, has no connection to it. So again, you may ask yourself, which is what I ask myself as we're kind of walking through this report, and that happened about 45% of the time. How does this happen? Well, clearly the way it happens is because there is absolutely no oversight. There is a process that is pretty strict in terms of what the law says, and there's a complete lack of oversight. And the only oversight that could happen is if I, as a consumer who was foreclosed on, would actually bring this to a court of law, and the court of law would actually have to enforce this process. So again, I think what we're not saying is we're not saying that contracts weren't broken in terms of whether people were able to pay or not pay their loan. We're not saying whether or not anybody individually or parties as a whole were bad actors. I think what we're saying is on the whole, as we've seen, California has bore the brunt of this foreclosure crisis. And what we are seeing is that this whole process of the way we are foreclosing property, taking property from the county land records, from the mortgage industry side, from the consumer side, is absolutely 100% broken. And I don't think it's working for any of us at this point. We obviously know that there was a recent settlement from the attorneys generals of 49 states across the country. And obviously, we think it did a good job of getting retribution back for homeowners who were perhaps victims of this process. Obviously, no settlement can be able to encompass everything, which is absolutely just impossible. What the settlement didn't do was actually look at, in the future, what should this foreclosure process look like in the state of California? And I think what we have for the first time is actually hard data. What we had in the past was anecdotal evidence. We had a homeowner here, a homeowner there, institution here, a subprime lender there. What we have for the first time is actually a statistical analysis of records in our county that point out to the level that the law has been followed or not in a variety of tests. And I think what we hope is that this report will be used by policymakers, by people in Sacramento, by the Attorney General, by our district attorney, by our city attorney, to be looking at future action, as well as the industry, to be looking at what this process should look like further.
Okay, so did you get that? California is taking the brunt of all the foreclosures because we don't have any judicial review. There's no court review of this process. Someone shows up to tell you you've got a foreclosure. They show up at the courthouse, and it's someone who doesn't have anything to do with ownership of your property, and they're trying to complete the whole massive fraud that was your mortgage by taking it away from you fraudulently. It is actually illegal to foreclose on someone when you don't know who owns the other part of the contract. You don't know who the lender is. It is illegal to foreclose, no matter if the person who had the property was a deadbeat and whatever, whatever in the scenario, that is illegal. So, so far, this has been going on. We're having about 1,000 foreclosures a day in California. They're picking us off one by one. It's devastating the whole country. And the feds have no solution so far. Wow. Guess what? We, who are privy to the fabulous information from the Public Banking Institute, we have some nice local solutions to share with you. And my friend, Janine Ricard, who is also a card-carrying member of Occupy Nevada County, she's going to tell you about it.
Okay, thanks very much. The first step would be for our state or county to declare a moratorium on all foreclosures on the grounds that they are economically harmful to all residents and also lead to crime and public health issues. The second step would be for the state or county or the city to direct the sheriff to not evict any more property owners from their properties. The third step is to determine which properties are registered by MERS. Now, you may have heard of MERS. It stands for the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. And MERS was created by the big Wall Street banks to enable them to slice and dice up all the mortgages and bundle them into securities that would be traded on the stock exchange. And of course, this was one of the primary reasons that we had our major financial meltdown in 2008.
Yeah, where we had to bail out the banks that were too big to jail and not too big to bail.
Right. So, what another thing that MERS did was it prevented county recorders from getting millions of dollars of fees for recording the mortgages. But the bottom line is that MERS makes it impossible to track who actually owns anybody's house anymore. As 2/3 of the houses in the United States, or 2/3 of the mortgages, are registered with MERS.
Yeah,
so this is a big deal.
2/3 since 2007. MERS has been doing 2/3 of the mortgage registration.
Right, and most of them through Fannie and Freddie.
Right,
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with MERS, it's really impossible to track the title. which means that a county can come and seize the property where the title is not clear, and nobody will object because the companies can't show that they own this property or this mortgage.
Wait a minute.
So they can use eminent domain.
Eminent domain? Eminent domain?
Yes, Pamela?
That's really an evil thing to do. You know that. That's big government taking people's property. I thought you were the occupier. I'm sorry. She must be an imposter. Explain this.
I will. Now, eminent domain can be used for the public good, and that is the reason that it is given. But it can be used to stop this foreclosure process, and that's the really exciting thing.
Well, I think it's because there's so many things bad that happen with foreclosures that it definitely qualifies for the public good, right?
Exactly.
Because it brings down property values, and then empty homes breeds crime and public safety issues, so it definitely qualifies for eminent domain.
Exactly. You've got it now, Pamela.
That's great. Okay, so now the thing that's really beautiful about that is that the county or the city, when they seize these homes that no one knows who they are, they get the homes for nothing. There's just a little administrative costs. So then the county can step into the shoes of the bank and they can renegotiate the loan. And they can even renegotiate it to fair market value, and they can even make it a little bit less than that if the homeowner just really can't afford more than that. They can afford to be generous because it didn't cost them a thing. That's pretty nice.
That's great.
I would like to see our county do that. I know that I've heard that a lot of counties they don't like to do things that are different, that hasn't been done before and so forth, but this would be such a tremendous thing to do. Somebody has to have the courage to start this. And once it gets started, there's going to be a ripple effect, and it's going to be happening all over. So maybe we'll start it here in Nevada County. So, okay, so I guess what this leads us to is the whole public bank thing, is that this creates a wonderful opportunity to get the financing we need to start a public bank. And as you know from seeing the past episodes, public banking really has a lot of benefits that we've already talked about. And it would also serve to make the county supervisors feel a little more comfortable, because they don't have to be managing these loans, they don't have to be creating more jobs to deal with that. They can just turn the whole thing over to the public bank. And the best way to start any bank is to buy one that's already existing. And we happen to have, right in downtown Nevada City, a bank that used to belong to Bank of America, and it's standing empty. So, get the idea, just buy that up, and here we go. So another thing that's really interesting that's been happening that will really help people who are underwater in their mortgages, and they're still paying. And when that happens, it freezes the real estate market. And that's going in the conservative state of Arizona. And so they spent 9 months researching this really carefully, and they came up with this bill that was approved almost unanimously by the committee that worked on it. And we call it the eminent domain bill, but they never actually said that. They're probably too conservative to say that. They may be too smart, because the public doesn't like that. But they created the state entity, and they say that they can use any legal means necessary to seize the mortgages from the banks. That's eminent domain. And so they have this state entity, it's not a bank, and they take these properties from the bank, and then they renegotiate the loans down to fair market value, so that a lot of times the owners will only have to pay the amount of half what it was before. And this also clears up the property title, gets rid of the mess of MERS, and gets things going in the real estate market. So this is something that we could also do with our public bank here in Nevada County, or any other county out there that wants to get into this.
Right, because in the Arizona bill, it's actually paid for by bonds.
Right.
So once again, the money is going probably to big institutional investors. We would prefer to see the county keep that money right here.
Yeah, and maybe with those foreclosures and the county revenue going into the same bank, they might have enough capital to go ahead and finance this. And it would be a great service to the community. In fact, it's kind of funny, I just found out that Ash Wednesday just happened on Wednesday, and the churches in San Francisco are removing $10 million from Wells Fargo, and they called on the bank and told them that they want them to have an immediate moratorium on all foreclosures, and they want them to repent for their misdeeds. So I think this is a perfect time to take this kind of information. There's a lot of that thing going on. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are taking their money out of private banks and putting them in local community banks. Wouldn't they be much happier if they could actually put them in public banks that are working for them, not for profit at all? Not that they don't want to have profit, but the bottom line is people. This is the time, county supervisors, this is the time. You have all the support in the community to start this, and then we'll have circulation of money staying right here, serving us instead of going off to Wall Street and the banksters. So, gee, did you have any questions? I know she's been arguing with me about this a lot.
Just trying to get it clear. I mean, it can be a bit complicated, and there are a lot of different ways that the county can use eminent domain to solve the foreclosure process. It doesn't actually have to do a public bank, as we've seen in the Arizona incident case. Another way that was mentioned was this nonprofit. So, it is an interesting question. Oh, and that reminds me, there was a bill in California initiated to study the process of using eminent domain on the statewide level to stop foreclosures. However, this was for the public bank, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was more. It wasn't. So it's possible to make a move for a statewide public bank, and that, of course, would help. Counties they could put their money in the state bank instead of having to set up their own one. But Governor Brown did not pass that bill. He refused to sign it because he didn't want to spend more money doing a study. There will be another bill, I hear, that will just say, let's form a public bank. We're not going to do a study about it, let's just form it. So there's a lot happening around the country, really.
Yeah, actually, right now, 36% of the states in the United States are either have a public bank already, as in the case of the Bank of North Dakota, or in the case of North Dakota, or they are studying having a public bank, or they actually have bills to actually start public banks. So 36% of the states, this is really a massive movement. People are really waking up here. And there's really a gazillion ways to do it. Another thing you can do, like you can, in this foreclosure thing, you can also work a deal with a local community bank, and then the money can, the properties can be transferred after the eminent domain. They can be transferred to community banks, and they can handle the loans. They're used to doing that, so that's another thing. Well, I think it's kind of interesting that somehow public banking seems such a boring topic, and yet for generations, really, I think the banksters have been running our economies and running our lives. And how do they manage to make public banking seem so boring? Because when you really find out how the banks are controlling things and how they can cause wars and cause depressions and buy up properties, I think this is really one of the most important topics that we're dealing with today. That and abolishing corporate personhood, I think, are the two most important things we need to really know a lot about. So,
and they're related because the corporations are the primary engine. They are 1%, the large multi-corporate national corporations are 1%, are the 1% of the businesses. And they are the ones that take the money out of local communities. you go down to a Starbucks, you start your breakfast day at McDonald's, and then you go to work for a corporation, and then you have lunch at McDonald's, et cetera, and go to a movie house where there's a corporate movie. You have just spent all your wages on services that the profit upon which goes to the multinational corporations and who put their money in Wall Street, which is then gambled away in the casino, the global casino that Wall Street is.
Yeah, so they figured every way to take the money out and suck it out of you. And actually what we are is debt slaves. We have been made to think that, we got rid of slavery, at least in the United States, and, we keep being fed this idea that we have a democracy when it's really a representative democracy, which is really being taken over by, it's been bought. It's the best democracy money can buy. But we actually, when you think of it, we are very much controlled. And so I like the idea of debt slaves. I think that just really resonates. I think that's something we need to think about. Are you a debt slave? Are you tired of being a debt slave? Maybe you should come and join us at Occupy Nevada County and join our Economic Liberty on Main Street working group, because we want to do a lot of things to get this information out. There's going to be a debate there's a possibility to bring a debate into town that's put on by the Public Banking Institute, and it's the great debate between public banking and private banking. And that would be a great way to get people interested and aware of and just conversant, like we're trying to be conversant about public banking versus private banking, and how a lot of the things that people are frightened of about it are really no need. And we really need to be well informed on this, because the private bankers are going to be doing everything they can to stop us, because this is the key to our liberty. That's why we call it economic liberty from Main Street.